Welcome to Author's Note. On Wednesday, George Osborne, the Chancellor, will deliver his autumn statement, giving an update on economic forecasts and the public finances. With me to discuss this is Carl Emmerson, Deputy Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Now, Carl, George Osborne here looks really rather pleased with himself. Is he going to have an easy time on Wednesday?
Wednesday is going to be very difficult. Since the budget in March, we've seen economic growth this year disappoint. We've seen the outlook for economic growth over the next few years, as suggested by independent forecasters, deteriorate. And the first 7 months of this financial year have revealed tax receipts coming in less quickly than they hoped for, and in fact even less quickly than you'd expect, given the weaker economic growth.
Okay, so the big thing is the public finances. This is what he wants to be measured on. This is what matters for the government. We've got a chart here showing government debt as a share of national income. This is really rather crucial. Tell us why and what this chart shows.
The chart shows government debt as a share of GDP. The red line is what was forecast at the time of the budget. And the Chancellor has a target to have it falling between 2014-15 and 2015-16. And
it looks to be just about falling just a touch in that red line.
At the time of the budget, he was on course to meet that rule by an absolute whisker. But the deterioration in the public finances since then suggests that under either an optimistic or a relatively pessimistic scenario for the public finances, it looks like he would be on course to breach it unless he announced a load more fiscal action to come into effect by 2015-16.
So unless we see tax rises or public spending cuts, your green and blue line, sort of your optimistic and pessimistic scenarios, show it rising definitely in 15-16. What about 16-17? Is it still rising or is it just coming down?
Just coming down in 16-17. I think the important thing to remember here, though, this target is not a very sensible target. It would allow you to have debt rising, falling for 1 year and then continue rising. And that's not a sensible situation to plan to be in. Therefore, the Chancellor, rather than taking action to meet this rule, should just abandon it and replace it with something much more sensible.
Okay, so he abandons this debt rule. What about the other rule? How do we keep the public finances in check? I think we've got another chart that shows what's happening to deficits, the amount that's being borrowed year by year. Explain this chart to us.
The Chancellor's other target says that in 5 years' time, I want to get the amount of deficit that isn't explained by either spending on investment or temporary ups or downs in the economic cycle.
So what's underlying the sort of deficit that's not going away? Is that the thing?
Indeed, the deficit that's not going away, that's not being spent on investment for the future. I want to get that down to zero or better by the end of the forecast horizon. Now, of course, you never actually get to the end of the forecast horizon. All we have to do is look at the official forecasts and see whether they imply that we're going to do it. And at the time of the budget in March, we were on course to do it. If you take an optimistic view and suggest that all of the deterioration we've seen since March is temporary and it will all go away, then again, there's no problem. If, however, a lot of the deterioration in the outlook for the economy, those weak tax receipts this year are permanent, then actually you wouldn't be on course to meet it, even if you extend the forecast horizon to 2017-18. You add one more year to the end.
So your green line doesn't show it being met even in 2017-18. I think most people think that the blue line is probably a little bit too optimistic, that it's all temporary, what we've seen this year. The Bank of England, for example, official forecast, OECD, European Commission, IMF, all saying actually there's something sort of more fundamental that's gone wrong in the economy. So we should be expecting George Osborne to have something a bit more like the green line, is it?
I think that's appropriate. There's lots of scenarios you could imagine. The world could turn out better than our most optimistic, or indeed much worse than our pessimistic scenario here. But I think the most likely guess is that actually he will need to announce further tax rises or spending cuts for 2017-18, for the end of this period.
So that then brings the green line up at the end so that he gets rid of the deficit, is that right? So if you have more austerity, another year of austerity, is that what we're looking at? Really?
Indeed, and it would mean that the spending cuts, instead of starting in 2010-11, just after this government took office, and finishing in 2015-16, which was the initial plan, they would run right the way through to 2017-18. At least that would be the current best guess.
Well, Carl, thank you very much. Now that's quite a bleak message. Austerity, spending cuts, tax rises for almost 8 years.